of Nairobi Customs Station, and I'll take you through the presentation first, and we are going to be covering the prohibitions and the restrictions. So these are things that are prohibited from coming into the country, and the things that can come in the country but they are restricted. So before, maybe I do a small introduction on KRA. We are from Customs Department, and the role of Customs, KRA has several departments, and one of them is Customs, and the Customs mandate is protection of society through securing of the borders and the enforcement of prohibitions and restrictions. So this is a core mandate of KRA that is vested under Customs and Border Control Department within KRA. We also do trade facilitation of compliance tenders, and we collect revenue that is legally due to the authority. The other role of Customs is collection of statistics that you normally see given by Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. Those are 20 statistics. So I've seen that the key mandate of Customs is protection of society within the country of Kenya. So this is Kenya, these are the borders, and in all these borders, Customs is deployed. We have the key border between Kenya and Ethiopia, is around 867 kilometers. We have around 684 kilometers, Kenya and Somalia, and then we have of around 586 kilometers. We have the Kenya-Tanzania border, which is around 775 kilometers. We have Kenya-Uganda, 772, and between Kenya and South Sudan. So the role of Customs and the KRA here is to ensure that everything that comes in, the control of movement of goods and the services and the people is controlled along all those borders. And whatever is prohibited or restricted does not find its way into the country through any of those borders that are shown there. So, but now I come to my question is the purpose for today, what is prohibited goods? And these are goods that are not allowed under any circumstances to be imported, exported, or transferred into or outside Kenya. So anything that is not allowed under any circumstances to be brought into Kenya. Imported means you bring into the Kenya. Exported, that means you move it from Kenya to other countries. Or transferred. Transferred is normally means moving to Eastern Africa states. So because we are under the single customs between Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, now DRC, Rwanda, and Burundi, we don't call movement to those countries as exports, but we refer them as transfers. And then we go to the next item, that is restricted goods, and these are goods whose importation or exportation is subject to meeting specific conditions before they are around customs clearance. So there are items that it's okay you can import them, but you have to meet some criteria for you to be around to bring them. So anything that is not prohibited or restricted is freely open for anyone to import or export. So I want to ask you a few questions. What do you think about this one? Do you think this one is a restricted item or a prohibited item based on our definition? Who wants to try? Who wants to try? Is this one restricted or prohibited? Can you see what it is? That's chrome. Some of you normally go somewhere in the evening, you must have met that creativity. These are the both sectors. So do you think this is restricted or prohibited? Yeah, your turn. Yes, it's restricted, meaning it's only the person who has the patent for manufacturing chrome who can import it. Because if I import it, I can go and make the same ring, which now becomes a counterfeit. Are we together? This one. What do you think that one is? Restricted or prohibited? Restricted. Who do you think is around to buy to bring it? Or under what conditions? You have said if something is restricted, then you have to meet some conditions, isn't it? So under what conditions can you bring it? Who else wants to try? Okay. You think about it when you go through the motion. You'll answer that questions at the end. This is a drone. Restricted or prohibited? What do you think? Restricted, yes. Meaning there are people, for you to get it, you must go through some approval process. Because you don't want everyone having a drone that is overrunning everyone's home, isn't it? Or you don't want it to go to a terrorist and then they can carry some things and drop it, like chemicals, they can come and spray us with some funny chemicals and they die in it. So these ones are restricted. That's correct. This one, it's a gun. Prohibited or restricted? What do you think? Huh? You don't know? Yes, this is restricted. If you have a permit, you can import it. If you don't have a permit, you cannot import. So the law of KRA is to ensure that the only people who bring the guns are people who are around to do that. So you must pass through a certain criteria for you to bring it. And why do we enforce these things? This is our legal backing, our main instrument. So that's the Bible of customs. So whenever you go and meet any customs station and they want to stop you, ask them the section they are using to restrict your item or to prohibit your item. And under this, the prohibitions and restrictions are normally provided for under section 18, 19, and 20 for imports, section 70, 71, and 72 for exports. And then we have a second schedule, and then schedule for EAC CMA Act. So the provisions relating to imports, the section 18 that I referred to, specifies the items that are restricted or prohibited. And those items are listed under Part A or Part B of the second schedule. Then section 19 gives powers to prohibit or restrict the goods and to amend the schedule. So that power is given to the Council of Ministers and the East African Customs. And then section 20 provides exemptions from goods on transit and transshipment. So if these goods are passing through Kenya to other countries, they are not restricted because they are not coming to this country. So section 20 provides for the items that are exempted. For exports, we have section 70, 71, and 72. Second schedule, these are the items that are prohibited. So Part A, one of the things that is prohibited is currency, false currency, and monetary instrument. So you cannot import fake money into the country. The second one is pornographic materials, prohibited. That means you cannot import that item under any circumstances. So now, where does the sex toys go? The other one is narcotic drugs, used tires for light commercial vehicles and passenger cars. You cannot get a used tire. That is important. We have hazardous waste. These are waste from nuclear materials, electronic waste. All those ones cannot be imported under any circumstances. Then we have distilled beverages containing essential oils or chemical products which are injurious to health. Things like items that contain mercury. You cannot import them under any circumstances. Part B, that I referred to, of restricted items, these are the items that are restricted. We have unwrought precious metals and precious stones. So if you are importing any precious stones, you must get permits. We are talking of diamonds, gold, all the precious stones that you can think about. Arms and ammunition, the gun that we earned, the pistols and the accessories to all those items, they are restricted. Then we have CITES items. These are endangered animals and animal products. You can import them, but they are restricted, meaning you must get permit for you to do that. Ozone depleting substances. We have coral and similar materials, or psychotropic drugs and genetically modified products. Those ones are restricted. You can import them, but you have to get approvals from government agencies for you to be able to bring them back in. Then we send the schedule, and it specifies items that are prohibited, things that cannot be imported under any circumstances. And it says that all goods whose exportation of which is prohibited under the Act or any written law for the time being in force. And the Part B of it, that means anytime that the Parliament changes the law and it restricts something, then we are going to enforce that restriction. That's what the above section means. So these items are restricted: waste and scrap of ferrous cast iron. You know, currently we have the issue of scrap metal. So you can export, but it's restricted, meaning you have to go through an approval process. Timber from any wood grown in partner state. And I said whenever I refer to partner state, I refer to the countries under East African Community. So timber is restricted. You cannot just decide to cut trees and start exporting. Then we have fresh and processed fish. It's restricted exports. Charcoal is restricted. Warehoused goods and unduty drawback and the transshipped goods shall not be exported in vessels of less than 250 tons. So items and unduty drawback means you brought the items into the country from outside, you paid taxes. You want to re-export them again and claim back your tax because those goods have not been used in the country. So those items, you can only do them with a big vessel, not a small vessel. So other than the Act, we also have other conventions that Kenya is signatory to, and all items that are restricted or prohibited under those treaties, Kenya is bound to enforce prohibitions and restrictions. The first one is the Shanghai Convention of 1909, the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, 1961, and the Convention on Psychotropic Substances of 1971. And this one will this treaty governs worldwide the control of narcotic drugs. So within that convention, we have items that are prohibited, items that are restricted, the narcotic drugs, and it provides on how they are supposed to be handled. Then we have the CITES. This is Convention on International Trade on Endangered Species, as I said earlier. Kenya is a signatory to this treaty, and anything that is prohibited or restricted in that treaty, Kenya is bound to do the same. Then we have the Basel Convention, and this one governs and controls hazardous waste disposal. You have heard of nuclear waste, you know about electronic waste, plastics, all those items are governed under this convention. And then we have the Stockholm Convention of 2004, and this one is on persistent organic pollutants. So that is I think we have now done a definition of what these prohibitions and the restrictions are, and the legal basis under which we do the restrictions and the items that are restricted. So what is the role of KRA here? The role of KRA is enforcement, but KRA is not able to enforce alone. So under enforcement, Kenya as a country has a multi-agency approach to border management, and we work with the partner government agencies which play a role in enforcement of prohibitions and restrictions. And among the partner government agencies that we work closely with is the National Police Service, the Kenyan Bureau of Standards, Port Health, Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Services, that is KEPIS. We have the Directorate of Veterinary Services and the Kenya Nuclear Regulatory Authority. So all these government agencies are involved in enforcement of prohibitions and restrictions. And most of them are very specialized. For example, Port Health will deal with anything to do with the medicine and the food to make sure that everything that is coming into the country is healthy. And then the KEPIS will deal with many plants to make sure that the plants that are coming or going out of the country are approved. They are not coming with the diseases, and they do the monitoring of all that. The DVS, the Directorate of Veterinary Services, will deal with the animals and animal products. The Kenya Nuclear Regulatory Authority will normally deal with the radioactive items, the radioactive materials. So, success stories. We are coming to the end of the presentation. I want to show you some of the things that we encounter at the airport. We are currently based at the airport, and we also have some borders that we manage from Nairobi Customs, that is Namanga and Loitoktok. So this is an example. When you look at it, you can see these are brains, isn't it? For Indies. Like, who has them? Like the end at the corner there. But what was concealed in there was found to be heroin. So they use this kind of concealment. Someone will not just bring heroin because they know it's already prohibited. But what they are going to do is that they are going to use something else to conceal it. And KRA has invested a lot in enforcement tools. We have scanners and we have the canines, the dogs. So these ones are able to sniff these ones and identify if there is this kind of drugs. You can see these clothes, and you can see the finishing of the cloth, and they are also concealed heroin. So this is another example we received at the airport some times back. This is a kitenge, but when you open the kitenge, there was cannabis, bangi. But someone is just making them like they are importing kitenge. But when you look at it, it had a lot of cannabis. There's another baggage. So you have your normal bag with a false bottom, meaning there is the top where you put your clothes, but there is another storage space below it, and that one, after opening, we found cocaine. Those of you who like enjoying over the weekend, this is the shisha operators. These ones are prohibited; they are not restricted. But I know we have quite a number of them around, and but those ones now are smuggled. Those ones are not important to get into the country. This is beer and cigarettes. These ones were smuggled from Uganda into the country. Beer is something that you can always import. But if you bring something into the country and you don't declare to customs, then that item becomes prohibited because you are not declaring. So there is a requirement that whatever you come with from outside, you always have to declare. Those of you who have traveled from outside, when you come, you get customs. There is and green lane and a red lane. One of them is written something to declare, the other one, nothing to declare. So if you have something to declare and you declare it, you're okay. If you come and you join the queue, the green line, you don't declare what you have and you have something, then that becomes a prohibited item and we are supposed to take it. We are supposed to seize it. So these ones are from Uganda, and because they did not want to pay the taxes, they decided to smuggle them. And you can see they are high-duty items, cigarettes and beer. These ones was in Maraba. You can see these are mobile phones. A mobile phone is a restricted item. A mobile phone, before a company starts importing mobile phones, they need to get a type of approval by the CAK. You don't want people to bring phones that can start listening to what you're saying. So the phone has to go to CAK. They have to do test on it, analyze it, and they say, okay, this model is good and it can be imported in the country. But these guys, they just decide to smuggle them without getting the necessary approvals. You can see ethanol. These ones are running away from paying taxes. Ethanol is restricted. You have to declare it. It can only be imported by manufacturers of, approved manufacturers of liquor. So these are examples of restricted items that we get. These were crabs. So these ones were imported through the airport from Mogadishu by the owners and not made the necessary declaration. They are restricted. So if you want to bring them, because these are food, you have to get a permit. But these ones wanted to get them out without a permit, and we got them. Then fake gold. You can see someone brought these stones and they said that they were gold. If you look there at the test, when we subjected them to a test, you can see the main method there is that PIMB. Who remembers their physics? PIMB means what? Which method is that? Huh? Murisau? Huh? Did you do, this was in physics or in chemistry? Huh? Chemistry. I think there are people who have been in school just the other day. So you can see, PIMB is what? It's red, eh? So that, but this guy understands they have brought gold. So you can imagine the difference between gold and red, the two of them. So that was the 90%. You can see there is not even a small, there's no gold there, isn't it? Even 0%. The rest is Hg. Hg is mercury. Or which one? Yes. So you can see how people use this kind of, can use the bonders to con other people. Because someone maybe had bought this item thinking it's gold, but it's basically stones. So these ones are drugs also. You can see they are concealed. This looks like more of a bulb. You see, they just take out something and you get that these are drugs. I'm trying to show you the methods that people use to meet the restrictions and the prohibitions that are there in place. You can see these shoes. Looks very nice shoes for ladies, particularly the tall ladies. And you can see what they are done. So in between, they create a space and they put these drugs. You see this is a nice carving, but when you open it, see what you get. Those were drugs. So they try to conceal by, you pretend that they make it like they are selling a carving, but inside it, they are using it to transport the drugs. This is mirror. You see, they package it as tea, and they try to pass it off. Now, mirror is very interesting because in Kenya it's illegal. But when you export it, you have to export it to a country that is also legal. So some countries, mirror is prohibited, and we cannot allow you to send it to those countries. But you can send it to countries that is not illegal. So those are some of the complications with our work. because we have to know that whatever you are exporting is also accepted in the country of importation. Thank you. I think that's the end. We'll allow Anna. When do we take questions? Now or later? Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you for the presentation. I hope we have covered our met your expectations. So at this juncture, we wish to take questions. So Paul Agonda, you'll have a microphone going round so that, and Evans will note the question so that also note. Evans you'll work out the questions, while Paul will make sure the microphone goes round so that you can ask questions. Okay.
So maybe before you go, I'm with my colleague Catherine, so the question that I'm not able to take, we're going to take it. Please let's restrict ourselves to prohibitions and restrictions. Cindy, I know you have a lot of questions about KRI, but the ones that also we can, we will take them. But preferably, we start with things that relate to the presentations that we have done.
Hello, my name is Mike. The Ministry of Trade yesterday eased restrictions on the trade in metals. So will KRA also, will you also see eased restrictions from your side in terms of the trade in metals, or any restrictions that have been placed since the embargo that was put by the President in January this year?
Yeah, I can take that one. As I said earlier in my slides, is that actually the trend in metals, in scrap metal, is restricted, meaning you have to meet some certain criteria for you to export. So once people meet that criteria and they have the approvals that are required, then KRA will facilitate the exportation or importation. So the issue is subject to meeting the set criteria that the ministry has communicated. Thank you.
I have a question. The prohibited and restricted goods, does KRA have a database sort of to record some of these incidences that you encounter? So maybe what are the volumes, the value of the goods that are being brought into the country, even though they are restricted or prohibited? And just some sort of information that provides you with a trend analysis, so that even as you enforce, you know what are the methods that people are using to bring these goods into the country. And in that case, value and volumes of these goods and the methods being used will be important. Thank you.
Maybe just to add on that, you can give us the latest figures.
Then now my question is, we're in a digital economy, and this definitely explains why KRA had that imposed digital tax. But on top of that, there is a trend where most of the restricted, illegal, or prohibited items are being sold through digital spaces. For example, we have shisha. We have flavored cigarettes at the moment. Most of them usually come through JKA. So you can confirm that as you give us the figures. And then what is KRA doing to tame the problem of digital? I'd say it's they're misusing the digital space and mostly to surpass KRA radar.
On my part, I'd like to know new areas of concern when it comes to the import and export of these prohibited goods.
Maybe I can take those ones. So So in terms of the current figures, I don't have the current figures here, but we have a database, and we can provide through Anna much later in terms of the figures. But you realize that these items, many where they are prohibited, it's very difficult to quantify them because that item is not trending openly in the market. So getting the evaluation of those items is also quite difficult. And I think I've shown you the methods of concealment and the methods that they are being used to move them around. And the other question is, what are the new areas of concern? The current new area of concern is what we call the dual product. Those are the products that are either for military use, and they can also be used for normal use. They are dual products. So things like look very normal, things like fertilizer, ammonium fertilizer. It can be used to make a bomb, and it's also required by a farmer. Those items are the key items that are now becoming, they are radioactive materials like X-ray machines. They contain some very radioactive materials that can also be very harmful. Right? They have something called cesium. So these items that are both for normal use and at the same time they can be used for military use and they can easily be misused. That is where now the enforcement is moving to, and that is the key area of concern. The issue of having items being sold on online, I think the issue is not at the selling point, but the issue is how does it come into the country? Because even if you buy something online, finally it's going to be delivered to you physically. And that's why I said at the airport, we are now investing a lot in technology, particularly the X-ray scanners, and we have the K9s, and these are going to help us pick those items before they go out. So most of those restricted items, we are working and investing in technology so that when they are coming in, we are able to intercept them. You realize that the reason why some of them pass is because we have a lot of trade volume and we have a short period of time to clear them. So the items that we're able to verify 100% is maybe around 10%, and the others we use risk management to do that. So you expect a few items to slip off, but with the technology like scanners, we are able to scan 100%, and whenever they are in there, we are able to track them. I hope you have answered all your 3 questions.
I'd like to add something about, you asked about a database for the prohibited and restricted goods. We have a database.
Yeah, we can go just up there.
Yeah, so maybe stand here. Okay. Yeah, so I was answering his question about the databases. We have a WCO network. It's a World Customs Organization Customs Enforcement Network. So this is a database that is updated by enforcement teams worldwide. So for interceptions like the ones we have shown you here, for drugs, for CITES items, so we get countries around the world updating this network as incidences occur. So that way we're able to even be on top of things when there are new methods of concealment for drugs or any of these other items that we highlighted. That's what I wanted to bring out.
So my question in that regard is with KRA. I know even much as there is a global database, the only one who fits that database on behalf of Kenya is KRA, because it's KRA that encounters those incidences in Kenya. And such information would be very helpful whenever we have engagements like this, because it's the only way we can identify that from the KRA point of view, we are having this number of cases of concealment. we are having this number of cases of undeclaration. So that database would be helpful. And just out of concern, I don't know how KRA operates, but when it comes to providing figures, I think you hold a back position. And I know even the March letter that is talking about is not likely to happen. The last engagement we had on illicit trade and the implications on revenues, I think about 2 or 3 months ago, we don't get that information. So I think the best for us would be to get in an engagement like this. I think it would be the best time to get such information. Otherwise, definitions and are quite information kidogo bado. Asante.
We have not entered out, but I have committed to give you. So keep in touch.
Through Anna, and you are going to get that. It is public information, so we'll give it to you. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Martin. Just noted tires appeared. Was it in Prohibited? Where you mentioned about used tires. So I was wondering, where do you classify retreaded tires, which we import? Do you consider it's a value issue because most of them is used tires? And then maybe if you can just give a small list of the most smuggled goods into the country, maybe by the latest trends. And the other day I was in my hometown of Hispania, and almost every local joint I went to had booze from the other side, and yet it's selling normally. So I don't know, most of these guys, if you ask, they brought it through the porous border. So I wonder, with all the investment that KRA is doing, is it that the focus is being done at the entry point and leaving the wider porous borders, or who is fooling who?
Okay, thank you. As I said, used tires for light commercial and the passenger cars. These ones are prohibited, and you cannot get a retrade for those tires. You cannot import them into the country legally. This is completely prohibited. The ones that you can get maybe is for the heavy commercial vehicles. The other retrade is maybe when your tire is over, you go, you move it, and they give you 2,000 and they are left with it. Probably that is the retrade that you get for the small cars. But and this one is not easy to smuggle in because this is a heavy item, you cannot conceal it. So for the ones that are prohibited are not is light commercial and the passenger cars. But for the heavy trucks, those ones you can get because they are not prohibited. The issue of the porous border between Kenya and Uganda, we are working with Uganda. Now we are under single customs territory. We do joint enforcement, and most of them now are coming through the normal border. And we also have internal teams because you see, customs stay at the border, but internally also when you bring those items, there are other government agencies that come in now to enforce. And we have bodies like police, and counterfeit, and even KRA, we have the domestic taxes department that come and they see, you have seen them in most of the clubs, checking whether you have the legal stamp in those alcoholic drinks. So we have a lot of enforcement measures that we are doing. I think that problem in Western is now coming down. I think there's a time it was much, much worse. And we believe that in the next maybe few months or few years, it's going to be sorted out completely. Have I answered your question? Okay, thank you.
Now, maybe some of the most smuggled goods are based on the latest trend.
Okay, thanks. Catherine, I would like you to answer that question. The most smuggled items. Yeah, most smuggled items. To stand here, always.
Okay, so far the most items are examples of what we showed you. For example, we have ethanol, we have beer from the partner states, we have marijuana. Yeah, those are very common even from the borders, not just at the airport. Yeah, basically those are the most smuggled. Yeah, they're the ones we intercept on a almost day to day. I hope that, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. I would like to add that we have a lot of the sex toys that come by passengers. This one is mainly air passengers. I think people coming from wanasema Manju. Those are quite a number. We also have we have a lot of drones coming, but it's because they are restricted. They are not. It's because many people do not know the regulations to bring them in. So you get people, you go there, you see a nice drone, you come with it. But some of these items we allow you to regularize. We facilitate you to get the necessary permits. We have narcotic drugs that attempt to be smuggled through the airport also. We normally have quite a number of them. We have the one shown there, things like crabs, animal, the food, the animal, what can I call them? Like we have animal products without permits, but those ones we are able to get them and allow the people to go and process the necessary permits. They are tested and then we allow you to take them. So I think those are the most common items that you are seeing at the moment. Yes. Yes.
Maybe the likes of Ethiopia, our neighbors, the north, the lack of having maybe common market or a trade agreement. Is it proving to be a challenge in terms of how trade is conducted through Moyale? And is it an avenue for smuggling and dealing in illicit trade? And maybe what is the way forward? Where do you see us in terms of improving this, bringing them maybe into a common trading platform?
Question.
So as you guess the mic, I would like to inform you that with Ethiopia, we now have a common border controls. We have one border control at Moyale, and therefore
Processes at the borders are now covered by the two authorities in the same side, just like we have in Namanga. Although we don't, although they are not in EAC, we have an agreement on how we work together, and our officers sit side by side. So we have coordinated border management with Ethiopia, and that one has assisted us in terms of enforcement and the smuggling along that border.
But the other day I was at the border.
Okay, what I can say is, you see, KRI, our job is normally enforcement. Of course, we have trade agreements with Ethiopia, but currently the concession is only 10% between Kenya and Ethiopia. But is something that is being worked on, but it might take time in terms of harmonizing the taxes the way we have with the EAC, because you know that between the EAC countries, we use a common external tariff, meaning something that comes into EAC countries come under the same tax regime, they pay the same taxes to their countries. But whatever comes Ethiopia, we don't have the common external tariff. We have different tariffs, and therefore we have to put the controls at the border to ensure that our traders or our industries in Kenya are not disadvantaged. So this is something that may take time, but I cannot give you any statistics on any dates on when maybe they are going to join EAC, or when we are going to have a bilateral trade agreement that harmonizes the taxation.
Okay, she just put it that marijuana is very commonly smuggled, and we see it as there's a lot of pressure internationally and even internally. There's this push for people saying it has medicinal value, so there's a bit of a transition. You see there's people who are legalizing marijuana. So does that pose a challenge for KRA during enforcement in terms of encountering people who use it for medicinal use or who are licensed to use it? And can you see a transition where it goes from being prohibited to maybe restricted?
I think that's a policy statement.
Can be answered by the Ministry of Health. But for us, our job is cut. Marijuana is prohibited in Kenya. So whether you want it for medical or anything, it's not restricted, it's prohibited. You cannot bring it under any circumstances into the country. I think that's what I can say for now. But now in terms of policy change, I think this is something that can be discussed in different forums. For us as KRI, our work is enforcement of restriction and prohibitions. The government says this item should not come into the country. We make sure it doesn't come through our borders. Thank you.
And it's
You mentioned that you work with the multi-agency team and the likes of National Police, etc. And now I'm concerned with the digital platforms where most of your restricted items are being sold. What are you doing together with the likes of, for example, Communication Authority to ensure some of these platforms are not easily accessible? Remember, even kids right now can access all those platforms. What are you doing? I know this is more of a policy issue. Are you trying to insinuate that you are implementing anything and everything without your contribution? And then the other question is on restricted items. Petroleum is one of them. Are you in position to give us data about the recent export of petroleum items?
Okay, I think I'll start with your last question about petroleum. Petroleum is not restricted, so that we cannot address in this forum.
Okay, but can you give us the data about the export?
About the exports. We are here about prohibitions and restrictions. So I think for a follow-up for data, you would probably liaise with Anna. Yeah? Or IPRA. Yeah.
So what you mean is that anyone can import petroleum if it's not restricted?
Petroleum is not restricted because
anyone can import petroleum.
No, they are licensed dealers. They are licensed, yeah.
So it's restricted.
No, it is not.
So anyone can import it.
No, I think you're taking it out of context. You're taking it out of context. But yeah, it isn't restricted.
I think we cannot get data from EPRA doesn't deal with exports. About the export data.
I think IPRA are the people who are mandated, who control. So they have the statistics. You realize that petroleum
is actually planned for several years, for several months in advance through the Ministry of Energy. And those are the best people to give you the data. But KRA processes the data, we hand it over. So they are the data owners in terms of who is the key person in that data. But if you request for that data through ANA, KRA can also provide the link. But what you're saying is that for us, the two of us here, we don't have that in data that you can give you.
Herald, I know a while back, and I think I gave you a response in regard to that issue. I don't know if ICRA did provide you with that data when you reached out to them.
I think it's KRA, the watchdog, whatever they were giving.
Okay, I know you reached out to me regarding that data and I gave you feedback. You and Mission, precisely Julian's and Boko. And I gave you reasons as to why maybe I was not in a position to avail to you that data, and you were to get back to IPRA. And based on what Bernard has said, they know IPRA is a main custodian of that